Isabella took all her belongings and left a letter behind for Melrose. It read, "Dear Melrose, it hurts me to do this because you're a good man. But I need more out of life than an old apartment and a beat-up car, now that I'm a nurse. Thank you for helping me get through all 4 years of school and saving me from working at that gentleman's club. I can never thank you enough for how you handled my research papers so I can concentrate on studying for tests. And though I'll be forever grateful, I need a lifestyle to match where I'm headed. I left the key and my half of this month's rent in the envelope. Please, don't try to contact me or beg for me to return. Live your life. Hopefully, one of the things you invent will actually work this time. Goodbye, forever. Isabella." This happened 6 months before the major charity event. The big booty Latina he planned on marrying after college left him devastated. But instead of continuing to sob and wallow in sadness as he did the first 3 months after the breakup, he kept himself busy. The ballroom of the Mint Museum uptown glittered like the inside of a jewelry box, but Melrose Morgan wasn't looking at any of it. He was looking at his clipboard. His company, Piedmont Precision, had spent 4 months planning the STEM Scholarship Gala, and as the lead mechanical engineer who had somehow volunteered to run logistics, he was the man everyone found when a projector died or a caterer went missing. "You realize you're allowed to enjoy your own event," said his co-worker Priya, handing him a club soda. "I'll enjoy it when the auction slideshow stops freezing." He pushed his glasses up his nose and grinned. "Also, when I stop sweating through a rented tuxedo." Melrose was 5'11" and slim, cocoa brown-skinned, 175 pounds of a man who ran, lifted, and climbed at least 4 days a week and still looked like the guy most likely to explain the plot of an Iron Man comic to you, whether you asked or not. He wore that identity the way some men wore cologne, confidently, unapologetically, and just a little too much of it. The cufflinks he'd chosen were, in fact, tiny arc reactors. He had 0 regrets. Across the room, Angelica Streets was trying to make herself smaller, which was a losing proposition when you were 6 feet 7 inches tall in flats. She'd worn flats tonight, out of mercy for everyone's necks. And still, the melanin mahogany mommy rose above the crowd like a lighthouse in a navy silk gown. Her body was long and toned, the flat, sculpted abs and powerful legs of a woman who trained for a living, built less like a heavyweight and more like a volleyball player who'd wandered off the sand and onto a runway, which, professionally, she had. She was in Charlotte for 2 reasons: a photo shoot the next morning and a favor. The scholarship fund honored young engineers and scientists from underserved schools, and Angelica's investment group had quietly cut it a check. She'd come to shake hands and disappear. Then the auction slideshow froze, the room chuckled awkwardly, and a slim man in a tuxedo dove behind the AV table like he was defusing a bomb. 40 seconds later, the screen blinked back to life. The crowd applauded. The man stood, bowed with theatrical humility, and adjusted his glasses. Angelica, to her own surprise, laughed out loud. She found him by the dessert table because, of course, the man who'd just performed emergency surgery on a projector rewarded himself with a second slice of cake. "You fixed it," she said. Melrose looked up. And up. He was not a man easily rattled, but he took a moment to recalibrate. "I did. It was a driver conflict. Deeply boring. You don't want the details." "Try me." So he actually told her, about display drivers and refresh rates and the particular stubbornness of hotel-grade projectors. And instead of glazing over, she asked a follow-up question. A good one. He blinked. "You're an engineer," he said, delighted. "No. Wait. You're not. You're too..." He gestured vaguely at all 6'7" of her. "You do something that involves cameras." "I play basketball," Angelica said. "And yes, cameras, and a few other things." She didn't lead with the WNBA, and she never led with the money. People got strange about both. Melrose nodded like she'd told him she was a dental hygienist. Cool. I'm Melrose. I organize galas, apparently. And the rest of the time I design cooling systems for industrial equipment. Also, I'm wearing arc reactor cufflinks, and I will not be apologizing for them. Angelica looked down at his wrists, then back at his face. There was something loose and easy in him, a total absence of the performance most men gave her. The puffed chest, the height jokes, the careful angling to seem unbothered by a woman who could dunk on them. Melrose seemed genuinely, cheerfully unbothered, because he had long ago made peace with being exactly who he was. "They're a little ridiculous," she said. "They're extremely ridiculous," he agreed. "That's the point of them." She stayed at that dessert table for an hour. She had a car waiting, a 6 a.m. call time, and a personal policy of never being the last to leave anything. She broke the policy. Here is what Angelica Streets did not tell Melrose that first night. She was 24 years old and worth more money than most of the people in that ballroom combined. And she had made most of it herself, before she was ever drafted. In her sophomore year of college, she and 4 classmates, all of them broke and brilliant and furious about it, had pooled a few $100s and started an investment group as a joke that turned deadly serious. They read every prospectus. They argued for hours. They got 2 early calls very, very right, reinvested everything, and by graduation the joke was a firm, and the firm was worth millions. The basketball career, when it came, was almost the smaller headline. What all of that bought her was leverage over her own life, and it also stole her time. Angelica's calendar was a war. Training blocks, film sessions, board meetings, red-eye flights, photo shoots, fittings, the runway. She loved it. She had built it on purpose. But it left little room for the slow work of being known by another person. So she had developed a habit, one she was neither ashamed of nor especially proud of. When she found a man attractive, genuinely, specifically attractive, she simply told him so. She was busy. She was direct. And she did not have 3 months to spend on a courtship that a single honest conversation could resolve in an evening. Sometimes she flew a man out. Sometimes it was one weekend of undivided attention, doors closed, phones off, and then back to the war. It suited her. It had never once, not one time, threatened to become anything larger than itself. She thought about Melrose Morgan the entire flight to her photo shoot. She thought about him during the shoot, which annoyed her, because she was a professional. She thought about the arc reactor cufflinks and the way he'd explained refresh rates like they were a bedtime story, and the way he had looked at her, up, and then straight at her, level, like her height was a fact about her, and not the whole story of her. By the time she landed in New York 2 days later, she had done something she almost never did. She'd looked him up. And then she'd texted the number he had, with great and unusual courage, written on a cocktail napkin and pressed into her palm at the end of the night. In case the projector breaks again. M. Melrose was under a sink when his phone buzzed. He was not a plumber, but his apartment in Charlotte was old and he was cheap and competent, a dangerous combination. The number was unknown. The message was not. "Hi, Melrose. It's Angelica, from the gala. I've thought about our conversation more than I've thought about my actual job, which never happens. I'm in New York for the week. I'd like to fly you out for a weekend. My treat. No strings, no pressure. Just you, me, and hopefully a projector that stays on. Say no if you want, but I hope you don't." He read it 4 times. He hit his head on the underside of the sink. He read it a 5th time. His thumbs hovered. Melrose Morgan was a confident man, but confidence and disbelief can share a room. A woman like Angelica Streets, famous, rich, 6'7" and carved out of pure intention, wanted to fly him, a slim guy who weighed less than she did and read comics on the toilet, to New York City. He thought about playing it cool. He thought about waiting 3 hours to reply so as not to seem eager. Then he thought, that's not who I am. Melrose had built an entire personality on the principle that pretending to be someone else was exhausting and, worse, boring. Angelica. I have read this text 5 times and hit my head on a sink once. Yes. Emphatically, yes. I should warn you, I will pack at least 1 comic book, and I snore lightly when I'm very happy. I anticipate being very happy. The reply came in under a minute. Flights booked. Friday. I'll send details. Bring the comic. A. He lay on the kitchen floor for a while, grinning at the ceiling, one arc reactor cufflink still on his wrist from a meeting that morning. Then he called Priya and made a series of undignified sounds into the phone. The hotel was the kind of place Melrose had only ever seen in establishing shots of movies about people richer than him. Marble that had opinions. A doorman who called him Sir without irony. He arrived rumpled from the flight, carrying a duffel bag and a paperback with a bent spine, and felt, briefly, entirely out of his depth. Then the elevator doors opened onto the suite, and Angelica was standing there in a soft gray sweatshirt and leggings, barefoot, her hair down. No cameras, no crowd, no gown. Just a very tall, very beautiful woman who had spent the last hour nervous in a way she found deeply unfamiliar. You came, she said. You flew me here. It would have been rude not to. He set down the duffel. Also, I wanted to. Extremely. I mentioned that. Via head injury. She laughed, and the nervousness cracked and fell away. He crossed the room to her, and even close up, even with the foot of height between them, he didn't shrink. He tilted his head back, looked at her, and said, You are, objectively, the most beautiful person I've ever stood this close to. I want to be clear. I noticed that before I noticed the view, which is also spectacular. Smooth. I have my moments. They're rare. Cherish this one. She kissed him first because she was Angelica Streets and she did not wait. She had to lean down to do it, one hand curved along his jaw, and he rose up to meet her without hesitation, one hand finding the small of her back. It was, for a first kiss, unreasonably good, the kind that rearranges a plan for the evening. But when she pulled back, she didn't pull him toward the bedroom the way the old habit wanted to. She looked at him, really looked, and said something she had never once said to any of the men she'd flown out before. Are you hungry? I ordered too much food. I thought we could talk first. Is that weird? That's not weird, Melrose said softly. That's the best offer I've had all year, and I'm counting this whole trip. They ate on the floor by the window because the actual dining table felt too formal for what was happening between them. The city burned gold and white below. She told him about the investment group, the 4 broke classmates, the borrowed textbooks, the night they realized the joke had become real money and none of them slept. He told her about growing up in Charlotte, about the uncle who'd handed him a busted lawnmower engine at age 9 and said, figure it out, about the exact moment he'd decided he'd rather be fully himself and lonely sometimes than be someone else, and popular always. How's that working out? She asked. Ask me Sunday, he said, and she felt something in her chest do a slow, dangerous roll. She told him things she didn't tell people, about how the height had made her feel like a spectacle before it ever made her feel powerful, about being 12 and already 6 feet, already stared at, already asked the same 3 questions by every stranger in every grocery store, about how she'd learned to move first, decide first, want out loud first, because when you're a spectacle, the only way to feel like a person is to be the one holding the remote. So that's the flying guys out thing, she said, surprising herself by saying it at all. I'm honest about it. It's not a secret. I'm busy and I know what I want and I don't like waiting for other people to catch up. It's always been enough. She paused. I don't actually know why I'm telling you this. Melrose considered her over the ruins of an $80 cheese plate. Because you're about to tell me it isn't enough this time, he said gently. And you're checking whether I'll be weird about it. She stared at him. For the record, he went on, I'm not going to be weird about it. I think you're extraordinary. I think you decided your whole life you'd rather steer than get steered. And honestly, same. And I think... He set down his glass. I think I'm in enormous trouble here, Angelica, because I plan to be charming and casual all weekend, and instead I keep wanting to know everything about you. The distance between them closed slowly this time, which was new for both of them. She reached over and took his glasses off, folded them, set them on the carpet with a care that undid him a little. I can't see you now, he murmured. You don't need to see me to kiss me. Fair, he breathed, and did. What happened after that belongs mostly to the two of them. It is enough to say that the foot of height between them stopped mattering the moment they stopped standing, that she found his confidence, that unhurried, unashamed certainty about who he was, far more intoxicating than any of the swagger she'd been handed by taller men, and that he discovered a woman who had spent her whole life being looked at wanted, more than anything, to be seen. There was laughter in it. That was the part neither of them expected. He said something ridiculous about the arc reactor, and she laughed against his shoulder, and somehow the laughing made everything warmer instead of breaking the spell. They were, both of them, entirely themselves. It turned out that was the whole trick. Afterward, she lay with her head on his chest, a novelty being the one who curled inward, and listened to him snore lightly, exactly as promised, the sound of a very happy man. She did not sleep for a while. She lay there in the dark doing the last thing in the world Angelica Streets ever did, which was worry that a good thing might end. She had meant it to be a weekend. Doors closed, phones off, and then back to the war. But Saturday morning she woke to the smell of coffee and found Melrose at the suite's little kitchenette, glasses back on, wearing yesterday's shirt and reading his bent spine comic while the pot brewed. I didn't want to wake you, he said. You looked peaceful, also terrifying. You take up the entire bed. It's magnificent. I have 3 meetings today, she said from the doorway, watching him. Okay. I was going to cancel them. Melrose looked up. Don't cancel your meetings for me. That's not... I don't want to be the guy you rearrange your life for after one night. I want to be the guy who's still interesting to you after you don't rearrange anything. He poured her a coffee. Go be a titan of industry. I'll be here. I brought 2 comics. I planned for downtime. And that, more than the kiss, more than the flight, more than any of it, was the moment Angelica Streets fell in love, standing in a doorway at 7 a.m., being handed a coffee by a 5'11" mechanical engineer who did not want her to shrink her life for him, only to make room in it. She took her meetings. She was, by her own assessment, terrible in all 3, distracted and grinning. She came back to a suite that smelled like room service pancakes and a man who greeted her by holding up his comic and announcing, Tony Stark has once again learned nothing about his own hubris. It's very relatable. I've missed you. How was capitalism? Sunday came, the way Sundays do, unwelcome and inevitable. His flight back to Charlotte was at 4. They had spent the weekend building something that neither of them had the vocabulary for yet. And now the clock was doing its ugly work. So, Melrose said, sitting on the edge of the enormous bed, lacing his sneakers. I've been thinking about how to say this in a way that's cool and low pressure, and I've decided against it, because being cool has never once worked out for me, and being honest usually does. He looked up at her. I don't want this to be the weekend I got flown out. I want it to be the first one. Angelica sat down beside him. The bed dipped. Even sitting, she was taller than him, and he tipped his head back to hold her gaze, and she loved him so much in that moment, it frightened her. My life is impossible, she said. I'm never anywhere. I'm in a different city every week. I have a season starting. I have a fund to run. I've broken every man who's tried to keep up, and I didn't even mean to. I don't want to keep up, Melrose said. That sounds exhausting. I want to be the fixed point. You go be a comet. I'll be the guy at home base who's genuinely thrilled every time the comet swings back through, who has a comic ready and a bad joke ready, and who never, ever asks you to be smaller so he can feel bigger. He shrugged. I run 4 times a week, and I've made peace with myself. I have a lot of patience and no ego about your success. I might be the only man alive engineered for this specific job. She laughed wetly. Engineered. I'm a professional. I assess the load requirements. I'm rated for it. She did not let him take the 4 o'clock flight. Not because she rearranged her whole life. She'd learned better than that from him, in a single weekend. But because she looked at her impossible calendar, at the war she loved, and realized for the first time that she was allowed to want something inside it that was just hers. Not a spectacle, not a headline, not a transaction with an expiration date, a person. Her person, who wore arc reactor cufflinks to a gala and weighed less than she did, and had never once, not for a second, wished she were anyone smaller than she was. They took a later flight together to Charlotte so she could see where he was from. The old apartment with the fixable sink, the uncle's garage, the diner where he'd decided at 17 to just be himself and let the world sort itself out around that decision. She met his world at his scale, and she did not feel like a lighthouse there. She felt like a woman visiting the home of a man she was falling for. Angelica Streets had built a life out of moving first, deciding first, wanting out loud first. She had flown men out and sent them home and never once mistaken any of it for love. She'd been so good at not waiting that she'd forgotten there was anything worth waiting for. And Melrose Morgan, 5'11", 175, slim and geeky, and entirely, gloriously himself, turned out to be the one thing her whole fast life had never given her the chance to find. Not a man who could keep up with the comet. A man who was happy to be home base, so the comet always had somewhere warm to come back to. For the record, he told her on the plane, somewhere over Virginia, her hand swallowed in both of his. I looked you up after the gala. I know exactly how much you're worth. I want it on the record that I fell for you anyway, and specifically for the way you asked a follow-up question about display drivers. That's the sexiest thing that's ever happened to me, and I've now been to New York. Melrose. Yes. Shut up and hold my hand. He did. He was very good at it. He'd been, it turned out, engineered for exactly that. Isabella got in contact after seeing Melrose and Angelica all over social media. After being used then discarded by the 8th medical professional at the hospital she worked at, Isabella thought if she could lure him back, she could boost her ego. After he said hello and recognized the voice, Melrose simply told her to stay blessed and never try contacting him again. Once he hung up, he blocked her across all forms of communication. He didn't care to entertain someone who would leave the way she did. As he lay in bed with his 6'7" melanin queen, he informed her about Isabella. These whores are so pathetic, she said. A year after they made things official, Melrose got Angelica the engagement ring of her dreams. He did so thanks to her investing in helping her man attain the patent and materials for a submarine which improved deep-sea explorations. The design was so efficacious that when Melrose launched his Virgin Solo mission, he uncovered an old British vessel that still held a case of gold, British guineas, and other historical pieces. So not only did he make the find of a lifetime, his invention got picked up by a maritime exploration company. The following summer after the engagement, Angelica and Melrose got married in the beautiful country of Cape Verde. Along with family and close friends, celebrities and other leaders across many industries attended. A great time was had by all. Like when some of her teammates got a kick out of seeing Melrose jokingly stand on his tiptoes to kiss Angelica after the officiant instructed him to do so. The party at the reception was one of legends that even made the gossip rags. This occasion was paid for equally by Melrose and Angelica. They proudly bragged about them making things a joint effort. For the rest of their lives, both supported one another, each giving 100%, day in, day out. Each showing up, even if they argued earlier that day. And each time they worked things out, it only guaranteed they were a dynamic duo no one on earth could ever split up. Thanks for listening. Check out our books on lefemmelachey.com and across all online retail platforms. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on all social media platforms. The erotic drama, What One Dance Can Do, from La Femme Lachey Publishing, coming soon.